Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Packet Protector, the podcast at the intersection of networking and security. I'm a little spicy today. Juniper JJ Manella here with Drew Conry Murray. And we just wanted to take a moment to connect with you guys as listeners and open the door for some dialogue. And we also wanted to dig into a couple of things. So we have an SSE ratings report from CyberRatings, and that's Security Service Edge. You've heard of probably SSE and SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. So they did some ratings across 7 of the top vendors or common vendors. We're going to dig into that. And then Drew and I are going to banter a little bit and opine about the future of HPE and Juniper through their acquisition.
Yeah, so let's start with some listener feedback. First, Adam wrote in from our News Roundup episode 70, where we talked about Microsoft wanting to maybe rethink allowing access to the kernel based on issues that we discussed in that episode. So Adam wrote in to say, JJ asked about in-kernel versus user space, EDR considerations, endpoint detection and response. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in the field, but I have observed Linux EDR products seem to have struggled to keep up with the rapid pace of Linux kernel development, leading to uncomfortable choices, patch vulnerabilities, and break your EDR or keep EDR running on vulnerable but supported kernels. Then he mentions eBPF, which is a technology that's been around for a while, but it's kind of found, I think, a new life that allows you to run programs directly inside the kernel without having to actually modify the Linux source code. I think the big eBPF vendor right now is Isovalent, which was acquired by Cisco. And that's my side note there from. But Adam says, more recently, eBPF has emerged with enough functionality and visibility into kernel operations with a stable enough programming interface that many EDR vendors seem to be adopting it, getting out of the Linux kernel proper, including Microsoft Defender for Linux. It makes him wonder if Microsoft is taking what they learned from implementing their eBPF sensor for Linux and bringing it to Windows. He left us with a link to some Microsoft info about that, which we will include in the show notes. So thank you, Adam. And also are still putting out a call. I think we'd love to do at least one episode sort of on, the kernel as a thing and how it relates to user space and get us more educated on that. So if that's your area of specialty, let us know. The episode before that, we talked about quantum computing and a listener wrote in to say, mind blown, which we love.
My mind was also blown.
Yes, it's a mind-blowing episode. So episode 69 on quantum computing. This listener wrote, serious rabbit hole I have fallen down that is connected to tunnels that lead to wormholes blasting out into a parallel universe that has more rabbit holes. I said I love this episode and already on the second listen so far. Topic is so interesting. It could be a cross-channel show. Could land in heavy networking on the Packet Pushers podcast network. He said, seriously awesome. Great. Love it. You guys rock. Appreciate it. I hope we're not just doing this to tutor on horn, JJ, but it is nice when people say they like the show.
Yeah. Because, we're just like talking we're talking to each other and that's cool and fun. But otherwise, if we don't hear from you guys, we have no clue, like, are we boring you?
Is anybody out there?
We're going to ask you, is anybody out there? Also on eBPF, I was remembering, Drew, based on something you reminded me of yesterday, which is on episode 62, where we talked about StrataShark. There was some eBPF stuff kind of brought up in there with Gerald Combs, that one of the Wireshark Foundation people over there. And I learned a lot. So a lot of these things that I hear, I hear kernel, I hear eBPF, I think Linux. Apparently a lot of that has translated over into Windows world. I'm not a platform person, so I think all of this is so, interesting to learn about. We also had a little bit of feedback. Actually, we had a lot of feedback on episode 67 when we talked about microsegmentation, which is great. I think that was the point, as we wanted to kind of stir the pot a little bit with that. So hopefully based on some of your feedback, we have some additional, things coming. I did want to address, someone messaged in and said, hey, why didn't you talk about things like, the HPE Aruba CX1000, the Fabric Composer, Cisco's 9300, et cetera, things that are using that Pensando NIC. So my understanding is those things are all data center and it's kind of workload, microsegmentation things. When I see solutions that plug into Illumio Guardicore and things that plug into the VM environments and stuff, I did go back and do some digging, and it does look like those solutions are designed for, either cloud infrastructure or data center infrastructure. Mm-hmm. It does sound like some of the Aruba stuff could be used for more traditional, like edge, headless, device microsegmentation. I have not seen it in that space.
So the idea is with these DPUs or smart NICs, you can run separate software programs on these DPUs to do things like firewalling or segmentation or traffic inspection.
Yeah, basically, I love the idea because for I don't know how long, I've been feel like I've been shouting on a soapbox out into the void that why don't we bring, the security visibility directly into the network infrastructure, because if all of the things that are passing packets are participating in that conversation, and no, I don't mean like mirroring ports off and doing that crap everywhere, but like you already have the devices. We already have purpose-built ASICs. Like it's already there, it's already in line. Why not leverage that? So I love this idea that we can take, these security features and mechanisms and put them down into, the switching infrastructure. Just as far as I've seen now, I will admit, like I did SDN stuff with several vendors back when we thought SDN was going to be hot and cool, but nobody actually did it, like 10, 15 years ago or so. And I've just kind of like been a little shy about it since then. So I kind of just wait and see. But yeah, everything I see about these products is it's still really designed for, data center or cloud infrastructures. But we will keep our eye on that. And as soon as they see those creeping into the LAN, or if there's somebody listening and you've deployed this for something other than data center segmentation, we would love to talk to you and kind of hear your story about that.
Yeah.
Which brings us to our next quick topic before we dive into the other meaty stuff, which is, we do want to hear from you guys about what you want to hear about. Drew and I are always kind of like, we're both really curious and we kind of pull guests in and find topics. We have a long list of things, but, at the end of the day, we're here for you, not for us. Well, sometimes for us, but also for you.
Well, let's be together. We're here together.
Yeah, let's all be all here together. So packetpushers.net/FU, and that actually drops directly into our little planning Slack channel. So we will both see it. You can also hop over to the Packet Pushers Network Slack for the community, and there is a Packet Protector channel in there for the podcast. And I think I have my notifications tuned finally for that. So we are monitoring that regularly as well. We'd love to chat with you and see what you want to hear about.
Yeah, and just to give you a preview of what's coming up, some ideas we have on the table for shows, I would love to do something on MCP, the Model Context Protocol. This is an emerging protocol for agentic AI to help agents be able to identify and connect to one another to perform functions, as well as connect to applications and services to help them do those functions. But of course, there are security issues around that. So looking to dig into that, and we're casting around for an expert on that can help us talk about it. We're probably going to be doing some more IPv6 security coming up and some more Wi-Fi security.
Yep.
All right, so let's get into, we've got two big topics to talk about today. One is a new testing report that looked at SSE, or Secure Service Edge, and then we'll also be getting JJ and Mai's takes on the HPE Juniper acquisition, having finally wrapped up, I think, a couple of weeks ago. But just wanted to give JJ a chance to opine because she's worked with both of those product sets, and there's a bit to talk about. So we'll start with the SSE report. So it was conducted by CyberRatings. This is a nonprofit, and we actually had CyberRatings on in a past issue. We'll put the link in the show notes. They perform independent testing of security products and services. They have released the results of comparative tests that they conducted on Secure Service Edge, or SSE services. They tested 7 SSE offerings: Cisco Umbrella, Cloudflare One, Fortinet FortiSASE, Palo Alto Networks Prisma Access, Skyhigh Security SSE, Versa Networks SSE, and Zscaler Zero Trust Exchange. So a lot of the big players. I will note that the CyberRatings press release said the organization didn't test Netscope because of, quote, high entry-level licensing cost and their lack of responsiveness to our inquiries to purchase their product, end quote. CyberRatings also said that Cato Networks wasn't included because the company was, quote, explicit in their refusal to engage with us or allow us to procure licensing for any form of independent third-party validation. Any thoughts on either of those, JJ?
Well, I don't know about the Netscope thing. I think that could be as easy as whoever got that decided to ignore it, or it got lost in the shuffle, or people were uncertain about, what to do with it. Who knows? I am a little bit disappointed with Cato Networks. From what I've seen from them, I'm interested in what they do. I think it's pretty cool. It is a little bit of a shift in the way we've done things traditionally. I'm disappointed that they actively chose not to participate. I'm also a little bit disappointed that Netscope didn't get in the middle of that too, because I think for a lot of organizations who, we've talked about Zscaler for years, they've been around for years, they've been, good at what they did, but there are other options in the marketplace. And I think it's fantastic to, to just kind of see what else is out there and what the options are and who's doing what. So, Cato and Netscope are two of the, what I would say, primary contenders in the enterprise space, is mid-market enterprise and up, to take some of that market shares. I'm a little bit disappointed that they, opted out either intentionally or not. So tisk on you, and maybe I would encourage you to rethink that for the next go round, because I don't think it's any secret. The CyberRatings team was spun out of, or re-emerged like the Phoenix out of what was NSS Labs which is a neutral third-party testing. I've always been a fan of NSS Labs because of their methodology. So they publish their methodology. They tell everybody exactly what they're going to do ahead of time. And vendors, manufacturers don't pay to get specific tests done to make their stuff look good. And at least as far as I can tell, and talking to, testing engineers, not just at NSS Labs, but other places, that, their testing methodologies are reasonable, real world, approximations of what we're dealing with. So long story short, they do this kind of neutral third party look and validation and testing. However, it is a piece of the puzzle and a piece of the view, right? Like, how effective is the security? So they've done firewalls for a long time. They've got some reports on, ZTNA. Anyway, NSS Labs is back. And I think that they're tied to a part of the CyberRatings, which is a nonprofit. So I'm interested to see what they do. I was, like I said, a fan of a lot of their security testing before. And maybe you can, Drew, talk through some of the tests that they ran on this particular SSE evaluation.
Yeah, so actually, I just want to touch on NSS Labs coming back. So it seems like the NSS Labs and CyberRatings, one is a for-profit, NSS Labs is for-profit, CyberRatings is nonprofit, and they're kind of working in tandem. NSS Labs is going to do the testing for CyberRatings on behalf of CyberRatings and make those tests available to folks to buy. But NS Labs is also now relaunched as a business where it's got kind of a new business model. It's providing testing to enterprises, security vendors, and service providers. Like if you want to, validate sort of your product and stuff, NSS Labs is happy to do that for you. So an interesting change. So let's dig into what they were testing. So the tests included thousands of malware samples, 205 exploits of known vulnerabilities, more than 1,000 evasion attempts, and 1,500 false positive tests, as well as tests to see if 5 common TLS cipher suites were supported. So obviously, when you're dealing with SSE, you want to make sure it is blocking malware and that evasion techniques aren't successful. I do love the false positive test too. I think that's an interesting angle to look at. And just in the results, no SSE provider got a perfect score on false positives. Several came close. All the vendors that they tested did very well on the malware block rates. I think, JJ, the differences we're starting to see begin to emerge in the exploit block rates and evasion techniques. That's where the big gaps start to emerge. Some companies doing a lot better than others.
So the full report, which Drew and I have, and you can buy online. Now, I do want to say, I just said you can buy it online. So the way they score, it's like recommended neutral or caution, just sort of public servicey. If it's a caution, they do publish those parts of the reports for free. You could just go download them. So there were a few things that I thought was shocking in here. Their lead into everything is kind of an overall security effectiveness scoring.
Uh-huh.
They break it down and get really granular here, but, Cloudflare and Cisco Umbrella and Skyhigh really did very poorly in that area. And I would say the rest of the pack, the security effectiveness is up in the, high 90 percentile or 100. And like you mentioned, that false positive accuracy, most of them are in the high 90s. That's another place where Umbrella kind of fell a little behind the pack. So it was really interesting to see how those shook out. And then there was one part you were talking about, the evasion resistance, and it was almost this binary: either the product did really well at it and got 100%, or it was 0. And that I thought was really interesting. So, the 4 that were in the recommended category all had 100% score on the evasion resistance, and the other 3 tested had just flat out zeros.
Yeah, you also see some really big differences in exploit evasion resistance. Several vendors got 100%. Others were scoring in the low 20s at 30%. So again, everybody's doing a good job blocking malware. When it comes to apparently exploits, there were some differences, and then evasion resistance. So yeah, there's interesting numbers to dig into.
Mm-hmm. They did break down the malware block rate based on the operating system. So like Windows, Linux, and then, overall. And those were all pretty good, at least all in the 90s. Cloudflare there was, in the low 90s on Windows. Everybody else is in the high 90s to 100. But the coverage by CVEs was actually probably something that I thought was very interesting, just because these are already, documented known CVEs. There's also the CISA Kev list, those known exploited vulnerabilities. Uh-huh. That they looked at to say, is each of these products taking into account the CVE and the Kev list, and to what degree? And they even broke it down by, critical, high, medium, et cetera, and then made an overall score from that. And there were a couple there. So again, Cloudflare and Skyhigh that were sitting around 50%, where everybody else was in the 90s and 100s. So yeah, to me, that's alarming from a security product. And I do think it makes sense to just go ahead and pause here for a quick second and say, this is one view. This is the efficacy of the security controls as, CyberRatings or NSS Labs has defined them ahead of time for this product category. If you look at other, Gartner's Magic Quadrant, Forrester's Wave, or whatever they, all of the other things where people categorize stuff, some of those are a more holistic view of what the whole, user experience is, license management, usability, user experience, the whole pie, support, how well is the product supported. So, while I do think this is really critical information to take into effect, because if you're relying on this, and the reason I say this is, if we're talking about SASE and SSE, Secure Service Edge, a lot of organizations are kind of putting most of their eggs into that basket. So if you say, hey, I'm going to get rid of some of my firewall capabilities. I'm going to maybe even remove certain parts of the endpoint security agents that we have on. I'm going to, do all of these things, and I'm going to rely on my SASE or SSE solution to provide that security. Then these pieces are critical. And whatever you're using the SSE for that you don't have another layer of technical controller product for, it needs to work. And
Right.
50% worky ain't cutting it.
Right. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, so we're not getting into specific numbers, but the companies that did best in this test were Palo Alto Networks, Zscaler, Versa, and Fortinet. All happen to be kind of like pure play security, so maybe that's not a surprise. I do want to say though, like the thing with these kind of like product tests, I think they're very useful. They provide some interesting information for folks, but they shouldn't be like your only decision point for a lot of reasons. One, particularly when we're talking about SSE, there's other issues around that, like connectivity. How are you connecting into this SSE service? Are you building VPNs? Are you using SD-WAN? If you've got SD-WAN from this vendor and the SSE you're looking at is from another vendor, do they play well together? How does the performance, both on the networking side and then the security processing side, if I'm getting 100% effectiveness, but it's also causing huge latency, that's something I need to be thinking about. Things like monitoring and visibility. How does this product look and feel? Can I find the information I need? Can my teams get what's important to them? Can they get the right reports? Can they get the right dashboards? Is it actually monitoring what's important to you? Especially with SSE, things like location. Does this SSE provider have POPs where I need them? And then, of course, pricing. How much is this going to cost me? So I think my big takeaway is there's good information here, but you shouldn't just be like, that's the one. I got that score. That's what I wanted.
Yeah. I would look at this and say, what are the functions that I'm relying on my SSE to do? If it's just data pathing and you're not using it for security, then some of this doesn't matter. If you are relying on that SSE solution to provide security functions, then you need to figure out, again, which ones you need it to do and do well. And then you can use this to down select and then, do proof of concept, test it out, and then just make sure you pick a solution that's going to work for you based on all of those other things. Like you said, pricing.
Pricing is a big one.
It is.
So we'll have a link to the press release and to CyberRatings, and you can decide if it's worth ponying up to see the full report. Okay, so the other big thing we want to talk about was HPE and Juniper. A brief preface here. HPE last year said they wanted to buy or acquire Juniper Networks. The acquisition process was going along swimmingly, and then the US Justice Department said, hold on, we're worried about a lack of competition in the technical market, so we need to investigate this. Recently, the US Justice Department said the acquisition could go forward. There were a couple of things that HPE and Juniper had to do. One is that HPE has to divest its instant on-campus network business, which is aimed at SMBs, and that includes campus switches, APs, and security gateways. So HPE is going to have to spin that out. The other big thing was that Juniper Networks is going to have to allow one or two organizations, depending on who bids for it and how much, to get a license to the Mist source code. And Mist is the AI software that Juniper acquired from Mist that's been a key of the WLAN space, and Juniper's been expanding it into their wired networking side as well.
Yeah, but it is specifically Mist AI Ops, not all of the Mist source code.
Yeah, just AI Ops.
Yeah, which is it's an important piece, but it's one little piece of their puzzle.
Yeah, so I've been talking about it on, Network Break and other places. So JJ, I want to give you the chance to go first. Kind of just, do you have thoughts? Did you think this Justice Department needed to get involved? What are your concerns or issues about this? Are there benefits to our listeners about this pair up?
Okay, first of all, I'm going to issue a little bit of a disclaimer because I know some people listening know I've had, relationships with HPE and Aruba and Juniper as both, clients that I've worked with and in a reseller capacity, in an influencer capacity. So I will tell you that even through all of those things, like I have no access to anything under NDA related to this. I know nothing, which is why I'm very comfortable just kind of giving my opinions and thoughts very freely here because there's nothing I know that I shouldn't know that I could accidentally share. So that's my little disclaimer.
This is based on your opinions, your experience with the product platforms, but you don't have insider secret knowledge that you're disclosing.
Right.
Here. Okay.
Exactly. So yeah. So as a little bit of context, when I was with a reseller and integrator for well over 20 years, we were actually an HP partner before there was even a ProCurve brand.
Wow. Okay.
So we were doing networking when Intel was one of the main networking companies, and then HP came out, and then later it was branded ProCurve. Like, I am dating myself.
You sure are.
Yeah. So I was there through all of that. I've been with HP through the whole H3C Comware, through the Colubris thing, through like every iteration of everything that they make that passes packets since they started making those things. I've had a relationship with HP, and I would call it an intimate relationship with HP through those processes, including through the Aruba situation.
Uh-huh.
Juniper, so a long, long time ago, the organization I was with, we sold, integrated. I was on the engineering team. So we integrated and configured, right, installed, supported the Juniper portfolio, not the carrier stuff, but all of the enterprise and the security solutions. So, everything from firewalls and again, harkening back to the NetScreen days, the portfolio that is now, spun out into Pulse Secure stuff. We had NAC products, we had SSLVP and yada, yada, yada. So I say that as a person who has worked in that capacity and still works to support customers that are using one or both of these solutions. So the whole Department of Justice thing just completely mystifies me. I've posted on, LinkedIn a few times, including a kind of long diatribe, months ago about why. I read the whole, DOJ document before this thing closed, and just 80% of it did not make sense. As somebody who has worked in this space for, about 30 years, like, I don't know where they were getting information, but some of the assertions that they made were just completely flawed or wrong, like just straight up wrong. There's lots of players in the Wi-Fi space. So the whole involvement with DOJ to me was just obscure. And I don't understand how that happened unless, somebody who has a lot of influence and money and resources wedged their way in there and started, throwing their weight around. I mean, it was almost comedic for a little bit. And then when we realized, oh no, this is really happening, they really are going to maybe stop this, it got a little bit less funny. I've been personally a fan of the merger, acquisition, whatever you want to call it. I have a lot of faith in Rami, coming in and leading that.
Rami Rahim is the CEO of Juniper and now I think president of the HPE networking business.
Yeah. So if we follow the train, I mentioned, the ProCurve brand. So when all of the H3C stuff, that went away, when HP acquired Aruba took over the networking portfolio within HP. Mm. And then they acquired the SD-WAN, was it Silver Peak?
Yes.
Okay. So Juniper acquired 128, HP Aruba acquired Silver Peak. So then that team kind of took over the networking department. And now the Juniper team is going to come in. Now, I think that this is actually different and well-positioned because the Juniper leadership has experience leading an entire portfolio, including security, which is why I think this is very interesting. Whereas, the Aruba team primarily came in and they knew Wi-Fi, and the Silver Peak team came in and they primarily were SD-WAN. Mm-hmm. So there were pieces of the portfolio, but it's hard to kind of construct a whole program when you've only really done slivers of it and go to market right. So for that reason, I'm very excited. And I do think, HP has dabbled with the idea of security in different ways over the decades, but has never really had a security portfolio. Juniper has a security portfolio. So I think that's really interesting also. Now there's going to be overlap. And I think this is one of the things that we're all kind of, this is the thing that does make me a little twitchy. And it's easy to just go, well, we're used to how things are, so let's just keep going. I tend to kind of I like change, I like opportunity, I like growth. So I'm being very optimistic about this. I don't care at all about the divestment of Instant On personally.
Right.
That's like SMB stuff, Soho. I don't want to say nobody cares. I don't care.
I attended a briefing with Antonio Neris, the CEO of HP Aruba, and Rami Rahim, and a question came up about that, and you could tell they were kind of like, yeah, it was fine. It was. They asked us to cut off something, so we cut off the tiniest little sliver of the business just to make the Justice Department happy. Is how it came across.
Mm-hmm. The licensing of the Mist AI Ops source code is the thing that I think is the weirdest, and I don't understand exactly what that means. What I've taken from the public announcements and the various, write-ups, the best insider knowledge I have is when people have pointed me to a publicly available article and said, this has the most accurate information in it. there's articles that have speculation and misinformation. There's some articles that are a little more, they got, I guess, the information from the horse's mouth.
Uh-huh.
So it sounds like, like you said, they are going to have to license the AI ops source code for a year to one or two bidders. I think $8 million is you must be this tall to ride that ride if it's two bidders. And they will not give, maybe rent or make available up to 55 team members to support the other organization, the bidding organization that's successful through that 1 year process. But those people will stay employees at HPE Juniper.
My understanding actually was that they would no longer be employees of HPE and Juniper, these engineers and salespeople. I thought they had to leave the organization.
No, I do know that for sure because I did directly ask that question and get clarity on that.
Okay.
They're going to get loaned out,
Okay.
basically to support the program for a year. And then I would assume, come back into, HPE Juniper after that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the product portfolio overlap is probably what is on a lot of people's mind, and it's what's on my mind. And I'm just going to go ahead and say to the Aruba SEs listening, I love you. This is not personal. I'm going to make some comments about some of my feelings about Aruba Central. I do know that there's a new Central. For me, it's a new Central because I have sold, integrated, and supported Central since its birth. Mm-hmm. So I've gone through numerous iterations of it, including the ones, on Green Lake. So I'm hopeful that they will truly take the best of both solutions and bring them up. But I will tell you, as somebody who has had to use and support Central for a long time, I do not love it. It's not intuitive. It's hard. It's clunky. It's very slow. I've had tickets and tickets and tickets into it. Now, I know a lot of customers and a lot of users don't have that experience at all. And there's a lot of happy people using Central, and I think that's fantastic, and keep doing it. But if any substantial number of people are not having that experience, and as an MSP provider for that, they can say comfortably there's at least a few. I do think that it warrants a look. And I think that the leadership is really going to have to dig down deeply and, get the Aruba team on board with, it's not about your baby's ugly, but it's about how do we just make the most beautiful baby moving forward. And it's not, right? It's not an attack. It's not a this, it's not a that, but there are issues. And I think we have to move past those issues, and moving past the issues requires that we acknowledge the issues first instead of just pretending like they don't exist. So I have feelings about that. I've been a longtime fan of the Aruba portfolio, the Aruba teams, all of that. And I hope they will continue moving forward and that we can just say, hey, look, let's take the best of what we have from the portfolio and roll in things like, the Mist platform, which has, frankly, just a beautiful user experience. And one of those rare products, and I've used easily 15 or 20 networking and wireless platforms in the 20 or 30 years I've been doing this because I integrate whatever a customer has. So I'm telling you, like, personal opinion, as somebody who's used a lot of stuff, I find it very easy, intuitive to use. Uh-huh. And it has all of the enterprise features that a large organization needs, but it's easy and simple enough.
This is the Mist platform.
Yeah, but it's simple enough that somebody who's not doing, networking or Wi-Fi all day, every day can manage intuitively. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a fantastic future if we can just go, hey, look, let's do this together. It's not a competition. Mist isn't perfect. There's issues with different things there. I think, though, if we can take the good parts of that and that ease of use and that fantastic user experience, something that truly is, built on microservices and driven by APIs, doesn't just have APIs available. Mm-hmm. So the whole Mist platform are APIs. Mm-hmm. The web interface that you interact with is, some subset of those APIs that are presented to you visually, graphically. Mm-hmm. But anything that the system supports, you can do through an API. And in fact, there are things that are not exposed that you can do if you connect into the APIs, or you can ask, support to enable that for you. Versus, I'm just going to generalize, like pretty much all of the other products out there were built differently. They were built not cloud native. Uh-huh. And so we've taken things that were, traditionally a controller, image or experience, and we've moved them into the cloud. And that's where I have the friction points, because I think there's weird, and I'm speaking kind of generally across several products now, there's a setting over here that overrides a setting over here, but you don't know that. There's sometimes it's like 3 layers deep into something before you find what you need when it really should have been over here. So I think there's a lot of complexity in some of the tools. And then there's some of them that are easy to use that don't expose the things that we needed in an enterprise. And I'm not going to, call out specific things here, but there are some products out there that, if I'm, being a security person and I love Wi-Fi security, like if I want to use a transition mode network where I've got 2 generations of security, one of the things that I want to be able to do is see which endpoints are joining with which. Are you using WPA2 or WPA3? That's like 101. That's like table stakes for me.
Uh-huh.
And not all products support that. So there's some weird like enterprise knobs and views that some of the super easy products out there just don't have yet. So long story short, I do think that they're really well positioned. Aruba has a long history of, fantastic solutions, fantastic go-to-market, especially in the wireless space. And of course, they've really cut their teeth on the networking for the past, decade or so. And I was skeptical about that. I wasn't sure because, frankly, the H3C stuff was pretty beefy. But Aruba came up and they came up with their switching line and their operating system. And I've been super impressed with that. So I'm really eager to see. Yes. So the overlap, if we go up to a 10,000-foot view, is in the enterprise space, we have a wireless solution.
Uh-huh.
So specifically, I would say the overlap is Juniper's Mist user interface and platform and Aruba Central because that's their cloud. Now they do have Central on-prem that they've been, working on and developing as well. I have limited experience with that, so I'm not even going to try to comment on it. But traditionally, Central's in the cloud. So that's one overlap. They do have edge distribution core switches. So, Aruba's line in that, I think, CX space, and then Juniper's in the EX space. So there's some overlap there. But then Juniper has, well, let me finish that thought then. From a NACI kind of standpoint and cloud radius authentication, Juniper has Mist Access Assurance, which is in the cloud. And of course, Aruba has ClearPass, which has been a long-standing product that it's not specific to the Aruba ecosystem. It works fantastically with whatever you have. And I've been a huge ClearPass fan for a very long time. I don't care if you're a Cisco shop or a Juniper shop or a whatever shop. ClearPass is just, it's a little bit complex. I'll give people that. It is, but it does it'll make toast for you if you need it to. So it's a pretty cool solution. So I'd love to see those things merge together and take the best of both and make them easy for everybody to use. And then of course, Aruba has other stuff related to their, user experience monitoring, et cetera. The, ClearPass insights and device profiling, et cetera, et cetera. So Aruba has a huge portfolio. And then Juniper has, all of the security stuff that, HP has just really never had. And what I didn't really mention in there is that SD-WAN, while HP doesn't have, firewall proper, through that Silver Peak acquisition, they do have a really nice SD-WAN solution. And of course, Juniper acquired 128 that also has SD-WAN that they've rolled into their firewalls. So there's some not quite one-for-one overlap, right? It's not completely aligned, but they have some feature parity between those two on the SD-WAN side.
Yeah, I guess my feeling is I never really understood the point of the acquisition from the outset. The issue of, particularly on the WLAN side, but there's also the SSL VPNs. Aruba has, they have a data center switch, but it's probably not at the same par with Juniper in terms of capability and market presence. Yes, HPE is getting net new a service provider opportunity that they didn't have before via Juniper, so that's great. And they're acquiring a lot of existing customers. They'll get new revenue in the door, but like you're saying, can we all just get along and have the best parts of Aruba and the best parts of Mist and make it come together? And that sounds really nice, but that's really not how these acquisitions tend to go. There's internal, like you said, it's somebody's baby. And so there's going to be fights over territory and technical decisions. And even trying to munge Aruba together with Mist AI, that's not going to be easy. So, and while the new HPE is trying to figure all this out, you're going to have, Cisco playing off all the FUD in this space. You're going to have Arista, which is just acquired an SD-WAN company, VeloCloud, trying to make more noise in the campus, including wireless. Ubiquity and others, there's an opportunity. Extreme, they have an opportunity now while HPE is doing all this internal infighting and who's going to do what and how do we get these two entirely different technical platforms to kind of munge together and work together. It can't help but take their eye off the ball. So I still didn't understand really what was the motivation of HPE saying, of all the companies they could have gone after if they wanted to expand their market presence in the enterprise and service ladder networking, why it had to be Juniper. Unless they see something about the AI that they think, we didn't have that, that's what we need. We are willing to take a lot of pain because we think that AI over time will get us where we need to be. That's my perception.
I think that was it. Now, I don't know that we'll ever really know the truth of, what the motivation or the driving factors were in this, but the AI. So what I thought was different from the first time I saw Mist, which was before Juniper acquired them, actually at like a mobility field day, like we were at not too long ago. At a mobility field day, I saw Mist. I don't know. They had relatively just come out of their stealth mode. And the thing, so again, this is pre-Juniper. The thing that really struck me, and I think the blog post I wrote from that event was Mist is not a Wi-Fi company. They're an AI company.
Sure. Yep.
Their core team are data scientists. And I think that was foundationally different and unique because yes, they had Bob Friday, who's a long history of building things, including the stuff that was rolled into Cisco with Aeronet, et cetera. So lots of deep expertise in the Wi-Fi space there. But at the core, we're data scientists. And what their thought process is your data analysis and your AI or ML or whatever you're going to call it is only as good as the data that you can ingest into that engine.
Yes.
And so therefore, we are going to build our own hardware to make sure that we get the telemetry we need for the right type of analytics.
Right.
So they made APs. They made Wi-Fi APs. But at the core, it was an AI company.
Yeah, that's my issue is that you can't just be like, well, now we're running Mist on top of Aruba or behind the scenes of Aruba because there was issues around how they're designing the actual hardware, what data they're collecting, how they're collecting it, how they're analyzing it, how they're running it through machine learning and so on to get the results that they're getting. You can't just like, sort of spackle that on top of Aruba and be like, now it's AI.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think some of the things that do make me a little uncomfortable about this merger acquisition is, I did hear in the press announcement, like the live video press announcement, and I think you attended live. I watched later, Antonio and Rami were talking, there was a comment about Mist in Green Lake. And I did cringe because now, Seth and anybody else listening that's reached out to me about my LinkedIn post, I am going to get with you and I do want to see your side of the picture with the whole Central, Green Lake, et cetera, because my experience such far has not been great. But I only use Green Lake for Central. It's a very myopic little slice of the whole Green Lake picture. I don't have the whole picture, but my experience using it in that capacity has not been positive. And so from that, I'm kind of like, I don't know. I don't know about that. However, I just kind of trust that there's a whole team of people that are way more in tune with that portfolio and way smarter than I am that are going to figure it out and make it better. That's my hope. But it did make me a little twitchy and cringy.
That is also my hope. I was a little frustrated that, after the acquisition finally closed, that we sort of got the same response that we got when the acquisition was first announced, that they're taking a thoughtful approach to this, meaning they have a strategy, they're not telling us what it is. And I guess I find that a little frustrating. I sort of wonder, my assumption is that out of the gate, sort of the newly combined HPE and Juniper is going to be like when Cisco acquired Meraki. They just let Meraki be Meraki. They didn't mess with it. They let it do its thing. And over time, you can see Meraki-like aspects now sort of circling back into the Cisco broader portfolio, things like cloud managed, easier to use, easier to license. That what was great about Meraki is starting to influence the larger organization. And so maybe that's the model they're going to use, like very, as Rami liked to say, thoughtfully try to make this merger happen. But it's going to take some time and it's going to be messy, I think.
Oh, no, it's definitely going to be messy. And I think, my hope for everybody in that is just, having an open mind, and it's not a competition. I think this new business unit, this new, organization is going to be successful only if Aruba and Juniper teams are able to work through this together. And it is going to be messy and it is going to be ugly. And I'm sure, some people will bail and go do something else. But both of those teams are so valuable that if they do choose to put their minds together and work towards the same goal, I'm confident that what they're going to come up with is freaking fantastic. And my idea of fantastic is, I've spent 20 some years deeply technical in architecture and engineering and whatever. And I'm at the point now where I look at things and I go, okay, so, those of us that are probably in my age category and have been doing networking for a while, we did everything. We did firewalls, we did WAN, we did wireless, we did switching and routing. Like if it passed a packet, we did the SSL VPNs. When you were a network engineer, if it moved packets, you handled it. And now things have gotten so complicated, you almost can't even do that reasonably. And so I look at, let me leave wired out of it for a second, like the DOJ did for some reason. Let's just talk about Wi-Fi for a second. If you have, and again, I'm not trying to pick on Aruba. This is the same thing with any controller, Cisco, whoever. right? But if you have a vendor and you have a wireless controller, and then maybe you've got multiple controllers, so you've got some type of master of controllers that orchestrates everything or aggregates everything for you centrally, and then you've got all the APs, and then you need some type of like NAC or access control or radius solution, and then you need some way to monitor and analyze data. Like historically, you're talking about, I'm going to use Aruba just because I'm far more familiar with Aruba's portfolio than I am Cisco's. But in the Aruba world, my clients have, controllers, the orchestrator for the controllers, the APs, probably ClearPass because I loved ClearPass. And then maybe, they had something like Airwave. Some of them, if they have switches, they've got like NetEdit. So if you take all of these things together, and of course I've, done Aruba stuff since I don't know what version, and then we did 6, and then we did 8, and now we've got 10. And those are new platforms that you do have to go back to training for. And then there's central if you're using cloud, or central on-prem if you're using NAT, which is different training. So at the end of it, if you have somebody who needs to manage your wireless network, and the reason I'm bringing controllers and, something cloud managed is because a lot of the customers I work with that are enterprise aren't 100%, controller or 100% cloud. They've got some combination of those things. And so now you have a network engineer or a small team of network and wireless engineers who have to go through a 1 or 2 week training for the controller, another, few days if you've got some stuff on central, plus a week for ClearPass. And there's actually multiple weeks of, like, if you're an implementer like we are, you have multiple weeks of training, not just 1 or 2. Because you've got, the administrator level, and then the professional level, and then the expert level, and they've renamed those recently, and I don't know what they're called, but you know what I mean? Like there's 3 tiers.
Yeah.
And when you're integrating, you've got to work up at least to the middle tier, and then you have to have certain experts in some stuff. So the long story short is just for an enterprise trying to manage things efficiently and effectively. And then you start to bring security into that. And we talk about like hardening guides and stuff, which are whole separate documents, not even included in the training. When I wrote the book, I had to go dig for everybody's hardening guides, Cisco, Aruba, et cetera. But you're talking about weeks of training to manage the Wi-Fi. That's my problem with what we've been doing for years. And that is why I like solutions that just it doesn't have to be that hard. But for the nerds, like for the CWNEs, for the expert wireless people that want control over things, I want them to have access to those things if they know what they're doing. But for the other 99.99999% of people managing a network, they don't need all those knobs, and they should shoot themselves in the foot with them. So my vision for HPE Juniper is get the awesome Aruba stuff, get the awesome ease of management that Mist has managed, and build something freaking beautiful.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
And I guess I would say, I'm thinking if you are an Aruba or a Juniper customer and you are approaching a re-up, you've got a little leverage probably over the next year, because they're going to be interested in keeping you. So use that to your advantage.
Milk it, baby. Yeah, get that discount. Oh, yeah. I don't work for a reseller anymore. So, yeah, I don't. I can, milk it.
That's capitalism.
Acme Wi-Fi is looking good, you guys. I might have to switch over there. Give me a little 40 off here. Right. Give me some points.
Yeah, make sure they see that Meraki rep walking out the door as they're walking in.
Yeah. Drew, you brought up something a minute ago that I wanted to circle back on, which was one of the arguments I had against the DOJ's sticking their nose into this and putting a halt to it is, you were mentioning, Extreme and Arista and Meraki, and I'm forgetting some people, but all of the other Wi-Fi vendors that are out there, because there are lots of them.
Yes.
And they have some cool stuff.
Yes.
I think like this is their opportunity to shine.
Yes.
This is their opportunity to go, you know what? We can wedge ourselves in.
Totally.
And the more places they wedge themselves in, the more innovation that's going to happen, the more development they're going to get into their products, the more users they're going to have. There's enough business for everybody. At the end of the day, there's enough business for everybody. I know that's not the mentality.
That is not what individual corporate CEOs want to hear.
I know.
Because they have shareholders.
But there is enough business for everybody. And I think we will all level up. And maybe this is, I like to think I'm not naive, having been in this industry for a long time. Maybe I'm just like old enough now that I just want to see, the rainbows and unicorns and whatever. Maybe this is a naive statement, but I kind of feel like if we all level up and we commoditize this a little bit more, and the things that need to pass packets just freaking work, then we can do a better job focusing on securing everything so that they can keep passing the packets. Because we're spending too much time and energy just making sure the packet gets from point A to point B. And therefore, when you were tied up doing that all day, every day, and you were putting out fires because this broke and BGP that and Wi-Fi update and something happened here, you can't breathe and you can't plan inside of your organization. Forget the vendors for a second.
Yeah.
Inside of your own organization, you can't participate in the future. You can't do zero trust strategy. You can't do digital transformation if you are firefighting.
That is a very hopeful note, and I appreciate that because.
And I think that's a great place for me to stop my rant.
No, it's great because otherwise I'll say something dark and sarcastic and just ruin it. So let's leave it there.
I bet everybody loves dark and sarcastic.
Well, they get plenty of it. So let's leave it there. I like that. That's very positive. I endorse.
I did hear them on their press release talk about zero trust. So I am very interested to see what happens moving forward with these portfolios, because please, Aruba people, please, Juniper people, stay there and do cool stuff.
Yeah.
Do cool security stuff, because that's what I like to talk about.
Get together and go forward. Absolutely. All right, well, that does it. We started with listener follow-up. If any of this that we talked about today spurs you to drop us a note, please do. We'd love to hear from you. packetpushers.net/FU. The FU's for follow-up. We do love it when you reach out, and we take it very seriously. So thank you for being with us for this episode of Packet Protector. And just a reminder, Packet Protector is part of the Packet Pushers podcast network. That network includes a dozen technical podcasts for your professional development on networking, security, IPv6, DevOps, and more. We have an industry blog, 2 weekly newsletters, a community Slack group, a YouTube channel, even an IRC group. You can find it all at packetpushers.net, all free, no login required. Thank you for listening.